The fishing guide seemed like any other old-timer on the lake, patient, quiet, telling stories about the ones that got away. But when the tour boat capsized in 30 feet of water, the tourists learned their guide wasn't just any fisherman. He was Captain Marcus Stone, former nuclear submarine commander, and he was about to show them what 20 years underwater had taught him. Welcome to One Human, One Story. Before continuing with this compelling story of hidden heroism and an unexpected rescue, have you ever encountered a quiet, principled hero who could be a former soldier? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit the subscribe button and help us honor those who should never be forgotten. The morning mist clung to Clearwater Lake like a familiar blanket. Captain Marcus Stone, though no one called him captain anymore, adjusted his worn baseball cap and checked his tackle box one final time. At 58, he moved with deliberate precision, each action economical and purposeful. His hands, weathered by decades of sun and salt, showed the steady confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime making decisions that mattered. "Morning, Marcus," called out Jerry, the marina owner, as he wheeled out the bait cooler. "Got the Peterson family today, right? Anniversary trip?" Marcus nodded, his voice carrying the quiet authority that never quite left men like him. 42nd anniversary. She wants to catch her first base. What Jerry didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Marcus Stone had once commanded the USS Virginia, a nuclear submarine worth $3 billion. That for 23 years, he'd navigated the deepest, darkest waters on Earth, carrying enough firepower to level cities. That he'd received the Navy Distinguished Service Medal for actions he could never discuss. Now, he guided weekend fishermen around a lake in upstate New York, telling stories about rainbow trout and northern pike instead of torpedo runs and strategic deterrence. Some might call it a come-down. Marcus called it peace. The Petersons arrived at 0800 sharp. Marcus still thought in military time, even after 5 years of civilian life. Bob Peterson, retired insurance adjuster, helped his wife Sarah down the dock stairs with the careful attention of a man who'd been married for 4 decades. Behind them came their adult daughter Lisa and her teenage son Jake, both checking their phones more than the scenery. "Beautiful morning for it," Marcus said, extending his hand to help Sarah into the boat. His movements were fluid, practiced, the way he'd once helped crew members through submarine hatches in rough seas. "I've never actually caught a fish before," Sarah confessed, settling into her seat. "Bob keeps promising to teach me, but 42 years, and she still won't listen to my casting advice." Bob chuckled, earning a playful swat from his wife. Marcus smiled, the first genuine expression he'd shown all morning. Something about their easy affection reminded him why he'd chosen this life. "Mrs. Peterson, today we'll get you that fish. I guarantee it." As they puttered away from the dock, Marcus fell into his routine. 20 years of briefing submarine crews had taught him how to read his audience, how to adjust his delivery. With the Petersons, he kept it light, local history mixed with fishing wisdom, the kind of gentle patter that made people forget their troubles. "See that cove over there? That's where the old logging camp used to be. Water's about 30 feet deep there now, perfect for bass. They like the structure, old pilings, rocks, places to ambush their prey." Jake looked up from his phone. 30 feet? That's deep." "Not really," Marcus replied automatically, then caught himself. To most people, 30 feet was deep. To him, it was barely getting started. He'd taken submarines down to crush depth, places where the water pressure would compact a human body in microseconds. They anchored in Marcus's favorite spot, a natural depression where the lake bottom dropped off sharply. The water was clear enough to see down 15 feet or so before it faded to green-black mystery. Marcus rigged their lines with practiced efficiency, his fingers working with the muscle memory of a man who'd tied knots in the dark while wearing gloves during surface alerts. "The key," he told Sarah as he demonstrated the proper grip, is patience. Fish can sense tension. You need to be calm, steady. Let them come to you. It was the same advice he'd given young sonar operators during silent running. Stay calm. Trust your training. Let the enemy reveal themselves. But here on Clearwater Lake, the only enemy was impatience. For 2 hours, they worked the cove methodically. Marcus rotated positions, adjusted depths, changed lures with the systematic approach he'd once used to plot submarine patrol routes. Bob caught a small perch, which he released with ceremony. Lisa managed to snag her line on submerged branches twice, testing Marcus's patience but never his temper. Then Sarah's rod bent hard. Oh my. She nearly dropped the pole, but Marcus was already beside her, his hand steadying the rod. Easy now. Feel that fight? That's a good one. Keep your tip up. Let the drag work. Sarah's face lit up with pure joy as the fish ran, peeling line from her reel. It was a beautiful thing to watch, the same expression Marcus had seen on the faces of new submarine crews when they first realized they were actually doing it, actually operating beneath the ocean. "How long do I fight it?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with excitement. "As long as it takes," Marcus replied. "In the water, patience isn't just a virtue, it's survival." The words carried more weight than he'd intended. Bob glanced at him curiously, picking up on something beneath the surface. But before anyone could ask questions, Sarah's fish made another run. That's when they heard the engine. Marcus looked up to see a tour boat approaching from the main channel, one of those party boats loaded with college kids, music thumping, beer coolers prominent. He frowned. Tour boats had no business in the fishing coves, especially not moving that fast in shallow water. "Dad, they're coming pretty close," Lisa observed, worry creeping into her voice. Marcus was already calculating angles, depths, speeds. The tour boat was moving too fast for these waters, its wake spreading behind it in a wide V. More concerning was the way it was handling. Slight list to port, overcorrected steering. Either mechanical problems or an inexperienced driver. "Everyone hold on," he said quietly, his voice carrying new authority. "We're going to have some chop in a minute." But it wasn't just chop they were about to have. The tour boat's engine coughed once, twice, then died completely. The sudden silence was ominous. Marcus had heard enough engine failures to know the difference between a stall and something worse. The boat's momentum carried it forward, but it was listing more severely now. "Marcus," Bob said, his insurance background making him good at spotting trouble. "Something's not right with that boat." Through his binoculars, Marcus counted heads, 12 people on board, all young, most of them drunk from their body language. The boat was taking on water. He could see it in the way it sat lower, the panic starting to spread among the passengers. That's when the tour boat's captain stood up and waved his arms frantically. Even across the water, Marcus could hear the fear in his voice. "Mayday! Mayday! We're taking on water! Engine's dead!" The boat was maybe 200 yards away, drifting toward deeper water, 30 feet deep where they'd been fishing, but getting deeper fast. And Marcus could see what the tour boat captain couldn't. They were heading for the old logging site, where underwater obstacles could trap a sinking vessel. Sarah's fish chose that moment to break the surface in a spectacular jump, her bass glistening in the sunlight. Any other day, it would have been perfect. "Sarah, reel it in fast," Marcus commanded, his voice cutting through the celebration. "Everyone, secure everything loose. We're going to help them." But even as he started the engine, Marcus could see they might be too late. The tour boat was listing badly now, its starboard rail almost touching water. 12 people, probably can't all swim, definitely panicking, 200 yards away and sinking fast. The mathematics of disaster played out in his head with submarine precision. Current speed, rate of sinking, water temperature, distance to shore. Most civilian boats carried minimal safety equipment. In water, this cold, hypothermia would set in within minutes. "Can we reach them in time?" Bob asked, reading the situation with businessman's clarity. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He was calculating load capacity, rescue procedures, triage protocols, skills he'd hoped never to need again. The tour boat tilted further. Someone screamed. "Hold tight," Marcus said, pushing the throttle forward. "This is going to be rough." As they raced across the water, Marcus's mind shifted into command mode. 23 years of submarine training didn't just disappear, it crystallized. He began issuing orders with quiet authority that made the Petersons sit up straighter. "Bob, there's a first aid kit under your seat. Get it ready. Lisa, see that orange bag by the stern? Life jackets. Jake, I need you to spot for me. Watch the water for survivors when we get there." They were 100 yards out when the tour boat went down. It happened fast, the way sinkings always do. One moment the boat was struggling to stay afloat. The next it rolled hard to starboard and disappeared beneath the surface in a chaos of bubbles and screams. 12 people in 30 feet of water, some swimming, some thrashing, at least 2 going under immediately. Marcus cut the engine and let momentum carry them into the debris field. His eyes swept the surface with the systematic precision of periscope watch. 3, 4, 5 heads visible. Where were the other 7? There, Jake pointed to a cluster of swimmers 50 yards to port. 4 more over there. Marcus's training took over completely. He'd trained for submarine rescue scenarios, surface evacuations, mass casualty events. The protocols were burned into his muscle memory. "Sarah, you're smallest. Get into the bow and help pull people up. Lisa, your triage. Assess everyone we bring aboard. Bob, you and Jake help me spot survivors in the water." They worked with desperate efficiency. The first swimmer they reached was a young woman, maybe 20, in full panic mode. She grabbed for the boat so violently she nearly capsized them. "Easy," Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd talked submarine crews through emergencies. "I've got you. Just breathe." He hauled her aboard with practiced ease, the same technique he'd used to extract unconscious crew members from flooded compartments. Sarah wrapped her in a blanket while Marcus scanned for the next victim. But he could see the problem developing. They were running out of time. The water was 58 degrees. Hypothermia would claim the weaker swimmers within minutes, and at least 3 people were still unaccounted for. That's when he saw the bubbles. 50 feet to starboard, a stream of silver bubbles broke the surface. Someone was trapped in the sunken boat, probably in an air pocket, but the boat was settling fast into deeper water. Marcus stared at those bubbles and felt 23 years of submarine service crystallize into a single moment of decision. He could save the swimmers on the surface, but whoever was trapped below would die. "Bob, take the helm," he commanded, already stripping off his jacket. "Keep pulling people out of the water. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, get everyone to shore and call the Coast Guard." "Marcus, what are you?" Bob started, but Marcus was already over the side, diving deep with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd spent 2 decades living underwater. The shock of cold water meant nothing. He'd trained in water colder than this, had swum beneath Arctic ice during submarine exercises. 30 feet down, the tour boat sat upright on the silted bottom, its cabin lights still glowing eerily in the green darkness. Marcus could see the problem immediately. The stern was buried in mud, but the bow was trapped under a submerged log from the old logging operation. The boat couldn't surface, but there was still an air pocket in the cabin. And inside that pocket, visible through the windscreen, 2 faces pressed against the glass. Marcus's lungs burned. He'd been down for almost a minute. But submarine training had taught him to function under pressure, literally and figuratively. He swam to the boat's side door, tried the handle. Jammed. The faces in the cabin were growing desperate. Maybe 60 seconds of air left in their pocket, and that was optimistic. Marcus kicked hard against the door. It didn't budge. The boat was made for surface use, not deep water pressure. But Marcus had trained for submarine escape scenarios, had practiced emergency procedures in situations far worse than this. He swam to the rear of the boat, found the engine compartment hatch. Older boats like this often had manual releases for emergency situations. His fingers found the lever, pulled hard. The hatch popped open, and Marcus squeezed through into the flooded engine space. His lungs were screaming now, but submarine training had taught him to ignore physical discomfort. In nuclear submarines, panic killed faster than any mechanical failure. From the engine compartment, he could access the main cabin through an interior door. But first, he needed to create an escape route. The side windows were too small, but the rear hatch could work if he could clear the debris. Marcus grabbed a heavy wrench from the engine compartment and attacked the rear window. 3 hard strikes, and the safety glass spider-webbed. One more blow, and it gave way, creating an escape route. Then he squeezed through the interior door into the cabin's air pocket. 2 college students, a boy and girl, maybe 19, gasped with relief when his head broke the surface of their shrinking air pocket. "Thank God," the girl sobbed. "We thought we were going to." "Not today," Marcus said firmly. His voice carried the absolute confidence of someone who'd faced far worse situations and survived. "Listen carefully. We're going to swim out together, but you need to follow my lead exactly." The air pocket was shrinking fast as water pressure compressed it. Maybe 30 seconds left before it collapsed completely. "I can't swim that far," the boy gasped, panic rising in his voice. 30 feet underwater, I can't." "Yes, you can," Marcus commanded. "I've made this swim 1,000 times. Trust me." It wasn't exactly true, but Marcus had trained for submarine escape scenarios from much greater depths. 30 feet was manageable, even for civilians if they didn't panic. "Hyperventilate for 10 seconds, he instructed. "Fill your lungs with oxygen. When I say go, take the biggest breath of your life and follow me out that rear window. Don't think, don't panic, just swim up toward the light." The air pocket collapsed. Marcus grabbed both students and pulled them through the flooded cabin toward the broken rear window. In the green darkness, his submarine-trained eyes could see the route clearly, but for the students, it was a terrifying journey through murky water filled with debris. The girl panicked halfway through, tried to swim for the surface too early. Marcus caught her, redirected her toward the window. His lungs burned with the need for air, but submarine discipline held. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. They cleared the boat. Marcus pushed both students upward, using his own position to guide their ascent. 20 feet to go. 15. 10. They broke the surface, gasping, the students coughing up lake water but alive. Around them, the Peterson family and Bob had managed to rescue 8 of the 12 passengers, everyone accounted for. "Jesus Christ, Marcus," Bob breathed as they hauled the last survivors aboard. Where did you learn?" But Marcus was already moving, checking vitals, assessing hypothermia symptoms, coordinating with the Coast Guard helicopter that had appeared overhead. His training had kicked in completely now. Not fishing guide training, but submarine commander protocols. It wasn't until they reached the dock and transferred everyone to waiting ambulances that Sarah Peterson looked at Marcus with new eyes. "You weren't just any fishing guide, were you?" she asked quietly. Marcus pulled his baseball cap down lower, suddenly looking very tired. "Ma'am, I'm whatever people need me to be." But Bob was studying him with an insurance investigator's eye for detail. The way he'd organized the rescue, the authority in his voice under pressure, the casual expertise with which he'd navigated 30 feet of dark water like it was a swimming pool. That evening, After all the statements were given and the rescued students were safely in the hospital, Bob made a phone call to his nephew, a Navy recruiter in Albany. "I need you to check something for me," Bob said. "A man named Marcus Stone, fishing guide up here in Clearwater Lake. Something about him doesn't add up." The answer came back an hour later. "Uncle Bob, I can't give you details, but Marcus Stone commanded nuclear submarines for over 2 decades. USS Virginia, USS Connecticut, USS Texas. Retired as a full captain after 23 years of service. Decorated multiple times. The guy's a legend in submarine circles." Bob hung up the phone and stared across the lake where lights twinkled in the gathering darkness. Somewhere out there, a fishing guide was probably cleaning his tackle box, preparing for another day of peaceful retirement. The next morning, Sarah Peterson appeared at the marina carrying a newspaper and a shy smile. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, finding Marcus loading his boat for another day on the water. "And to give you this." The newspaper was folded to a small article on page 3. "Local fishing guide rescues 12 in lake accident." The story mentioned Marcus by name but gave no background, just called him an experienced waterman who happened to be in the right place at the right time. "They got it wrong, you know," Sarah said softly. "It wasn't luck you were there. And it wasn't luck you knew exactly what to do." Marcus glanced at the article, then folded the paper and handed it back. "Mrs. Peterson, sometimes the most important things we do are the ones nobody writes about." She studied his face, seeing something in his eyes that reminded her of her own father, who'd served in Korea and never talked about it. "Will we see you next anniversary?" she asked. Marcus smiled, the same genuine expression he'd shown when watching her fight that base. "Ma'am, I'll be here as long as people need a guide." As she walked away, Marcus returned to his preparations. Another day, another group of tourists who wanted to catch fish and forget their troubles. They'd never know their guide had once commanded vessels capable of changing the course of history. But that was fine with Marcus Stone. He'd spent 23 years in service of things too important to discuss. Now he served something simpler but equally vital: the human need for peace, for connection with nature, for the simple joy of a fish on the line. Some stories are written in classified files and submarine logs. Others are written in the quiet moments between a guide and his passengers, in the patient teaching of knots and casts, in the understanding that real strength is knowing when to use it and when to simply watch the sunrise over a calm lake. The water held its secrets, and so did Marcus Stone. And that was exactly how both of them preferred it. In the end, the most powerful stories aren't always the ones that get told. Sometimes they're the ones lived quietly, day by day, by people who've seen the depths and chosen to help others find the surface. That's the story of Captain Marcus Stone, submarine commander turned fishing guide, who understood that the greatest battles are often fought not with weapons, but with patience, wisdom, and the quiet courage to dive deep when others need you most. This story was brought to you by One Human, One Story. Have you ever met someone whose quiet competence suggested hidden depths? Tell us about them in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe to our channel.